Hey guys, here to get into a band that's really been catching up to me lately. I spent a lot of my youth, a bit of my youth, like early college, early 20s, listening to this band some, and then they came back to me and like really, a really powerful force, which is the band Comus. They're powerful to you because they're genuinely horrifying. I feel like they take the genre of folk to some really uniquely dark shades. And I think this is perhaps they're essentially a one album wonder band, but that album is literally so stinking good. I mean, because you just have all of this dark energy living inside of it, and it portrays vocals that almost feel like it's gibbering a little bit, but it's trying to portray something of a cult tribe feeling, implying that there's all kinds of violence, sexual abuse going on in this kind of world. But that's what makes this just really a terrifying sound that's really hard to imitate anywhere else because it's uniquely just a gothic feeling of just being out in the middle of the woods and just finding like some kind of horrifying like witchcraft cult, evil witch thing going on where it's like sexual assault happens, violence happens, just horrible imagery basically. But the album that really makes them is First Utterance, which they released in 1971. And yeah, this is just an album. It really doesn't make sense. Like I feel like everything about the sound, it in the purest sense feels like you've been taken to another place on Earth that's ultimately more terrifying and mystifying. Than most other places would be because yeah, this album really sounds like an alien. It doesn't even sound like anything that was going on in the 60s, 70s, or like, it really just feels like this game. It sounds like it almost came out of like the 15th century in a weird way, but it also sounds a little futuristic in the way it almost doesn't. Nothing about this album really makes sense. I think is the main idea, but it's ultimately trying to evoke something of the Middle Ages, just something of what a dark age actually sounds like. I think in the purest kind of way, and it feels like a sound that is really terrifying. I mean, simply put, you can kind of hear a place where like all religions are being tossed out the door. You can tell that like torture is happening for standing for any kind of religious belief in this world. Um, and this is just again very terrifying. It feels like again like a dark like an evil sort of cult ritual is kind of happening out in the middle of a forest. And yeah, it's just the mysticism that I think that drives this sound. I mean, it's really unique. Um, it kind of, again, because the band, of course, Comus, that's a Greek god himself. But I think a lot of this is just kind of going for more of, just insanity. This is trying to portray pure raw insanity. It makes you think of films like The Devils that came out the same year. Like, this is just like crazy, over the top violence going on in the sound. And yeah, like songs like the Herald, like it really feels like it's kind of like a hymn to like a lost god, basically. You could say a lot of this sounds like like a very gothic take on just like a goodbye to a better force because you're in the face of hell so intensely. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's just hard to really define what this album really is exactly. It's like it's just kind of its own language entirely. I mean, nothing sounds like this really. Um, it's like it just sounds like again, I would never have called this as being an early 70s kind of sound. This is just it could have come out anywhere with like, okay, I got that, but it's just crazy. This is like the same year like Sly and the Family Stone doing There's Alright going on, what's going on, like Joni Mitchell's Blue, Led Zeppelin 4, like all that. It's just crazy. But the album definitely might take some time to grow because at first it's almost a very alienating. It's like, why would I want to listen to this? I've heard this question asked quite a bit. Why would I want to sit down and listen to something this horrible? I just think that there's a full spectrum. As much as there's heaven, there is hell, I believe. So this is kind of what hell sounds like. And the fascination of wanting to go here is just like whenever you feel those kind of moods in any sort of way, a pressure that there is hell out there, Satan lives out there somewhere. Literally, it's almost like the mood is so horrible and so anxious that it's like you just need something that also sees this. It's almost like don't tell me it, don't deny it to me. I just want to find kind of like a nice, not that it's not nice, but it's just a way of kind of just tuning into those emotions so I can kind of process it and ultimately come closer to God, like heaven. But it takes some help, knowing of hell, I think, to really want God in your life. And just imagining going through scenarios, like much like going through some of the darkest films, it's just this feeling of like just yeah, like something overwhelmingly horrible is happening. Like like Diana. I mean, that's just such a song. But the only song on the album that remotely sounds like a little bit of '60s influences going into it. The bass certainly has a little bit of a Taxman influence going into it, but everything else here is just like, and it also feels like something of like the Herald. It's almost a spiritual cleanse of just missing a greater God and force in your life. Whenever it's just completely removed, you have songs like Drip Drip. And I mean, yeah, that song title, just nothing sounds good about that. And it sounds like about the most violent thing. It's just everything coming together. Songs like Songs for Comus also just has like this flute kind of going around it. So it just ends up being like this crazy insanity. Like it's portraying insanity, I think, in the purest sense. The Bitten, I mean, that's just really a crazy song that kind of just gets into. Again, it sounds like there's a lot of like maybe a lot of people are being tormented for their Christian beliefs, particularly. Like that could be. I don't know what religion, but to me, just because that's the religion I've been the most closely associated with, I think that it makes me think of that. It's always like The Bitten and like The Prisoner. But again, it's a tough album to articulate exactly what's going on, but you never forget it. I mean, this is really dark folk sound. I mean, maybe it's like, maybe a little influence of bands like King Crimson and Record of the Crimson King, but overall, there's just nothing that sounds like this bizarre place, the worst place of the Dark Ages. And just thank God, I would, didn't have to be around that necessarily, but just knowing that, yeah, this kind of thing still is out there. It's like, because all enough societal forces will always come around to tell me, no matter how good things are, this is there too. Don't forget that. And I don't want to forget that, because again, it's that feeling of whenever things are going bad, you want to pray for something good. When things are going good, you kind of want to be in tune with that certain voice of anxiety that this isn't going to last forever. That something's going to come around and kill this moment off. So it kind of goes both ways. But that's first Utterance. Then we get in 1974, To Keep From Crying. And yeah, they lost their mystique on this album. I think that all the layers just end up not really being too much. It just ends up kind of just being songs about like love songs. I'm like, that's not what you want to hear after that last album they did. It's literally just like, that is the silence stuff. Yeah, it's just feels like it's just no, I can't do it. But then, yeah, literally almost 40 years later, they released Out of the Coma in the year 2012, so 38 years later. And yeah, I mean, they were kind of going for a bit of a comeback feeling of first Utterance, but they most certainly did not sound like that, because I mean, yeah, this is just, it's a pretty uninteresting listen overall. I feel like it's not really bad, but it doesn't really stand out in any kind of way. It's really not a great comeback album in the end. So yeah, that's Comus. They're most certainly a one album wonder band, but that one album is enough. Much like American football, it's just like that. I mean, it's just that one album, but this is obviously the most different band in the world from American football. I'm getting everything feels different here. This is horrifying. This is dark. This is the depths of hell. American football is that angel. This is hell. This is the state. This is Satan possessing an angel. And this is a sound here that you just have to hear for yourself. It's very difficult to describe exactly the emotions this awakens, but they're very complicated and dark, most certainly, and they're adventurous, and it's very maddening. Certainly is the best word. Props to apps, just maddening. That's Comus. You may not even love this album particularly, but if you're just, I don't recommend this band to just anybody. But if you are fascinated by dark hell, like just real insanity, and maybe not even loving what's going on at first, but rather letting something of an impact wash over you, where it will kind of transcend, music as the sound of folk particularly, and you just feel like being open for an adventure, sonic adventure. Then this is certainly a great listen. This is one of the best albums I've ever. First Utterance is one of my favorite albums, because that is like a dark contrast of a lot of light. This is really dark, but that's Comus.